Look at this face. Innocent, kind, trustworthy. Now watch as it morphs into something sinister, cruel, monstrous, unsettling, isn't it? But here's the kicker, darling. This transformation isn't special effects. It's anyone. It's you. It's all of us. Want to see how it happens? Oh, you're in for a treat. We're about to embark on a deliciously dark journey, courtesy of Philip Zimbardo's The Lucifer Effect. It's a tale of how heroes become villains, and trust me, it's more thrilling than any horror movie. Now, I'll let you in on a little secret. By the end of this video, you might just question your own capacity for evil. Scary, right? But that's not all. I've got a juicy revelation about a well-known figure's sinister turn that'll make your skin crawl. Stick around, won't you? After all, the descent into darkness is always more fun with company.
Say it louder. I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned my child!
That descent into darkness sounds delightful, doesn't it? But what if I told you it starts with something as innocent as your morning coffee routine? Oh yes, darling. That little white lie to your barista could be your first step towards becoming a monster. Intrigued? You see, Philip Zimbardo, in his deliciously dark The Lucifer Effect, shows us that the line between good and evil isn't a bold, clear boundary. It's more like a blurry smudge, waiting for us to stumble across it. And oh, how easy it is to stumble. If you want to learn more about real life and fictional wickedness, subscribe so you won't miss out. Picture this. You're running late for work, and you tell your barista you're in a rush. A tiny fib, right? But what if that lie snowballs? Next thing you know, you're fudging numbers on your expense report, then covering for a colleague's misconduct. See how quickly we can slide down that slippery slope? But darling, it gets even juicier. Zimbardo's work reveals that we're all just a few steps away from becoming the villain in someone else's story.
That can make ordinary people do things they never could imagine doing.
And the first step, it's as simple as following orders. Remember that shocking statistic I teased earlier? Well, here it is. In a famous experiment, 65% of participants were willing to administer what they believed were lethal electric shocks to another person. Can you believe it? These weren't sadists or psychopaths. They were ordinary people, just like you and me, following the instructions of an authority figure. Oh, the things we do when someone in a lab coat tells us to, right? It's called the Milgram experiment, and it's as disturbing as it is fascinating. Participants thought they were part of a study on memory and learning. In reality, they were being tested on their obedience to authority. The learner, an actor in on the experiment, would give wrong answers, and the participant was instructed to administer increasingly powerful electric shocks as punishment. The shocks weren't real, of course, but the participants didn't know that. They could hear the learner crying out in pain, begging them to stop. And yet, most of them continued, simply because a man in a white coat told them to. Isn't it deliciously terrifying? The power of authority to override our moral compass, to make us do things we'd never dream of doing on our own? It's like a spell, darling, and we're all susceptible to its dark magic. But here's the real kicker. This isn't just about lab experiments or extreme situations. It's about everyday life. That boss who asks you to fudge some numbers, the friend who encourages you to spread a nasty rumor, the stranger who tells you it's okay to cut in line. They're all potential authorities, all capable of nudging us towards that blurry line between right and wrong. And the truly scary part? We often don't even realize we're crossing that line. We justify, we rationalize, we tell ourselves it's just this once. But each little transgression makes the next one easier, until suddenly we find ourselves doing things we never thought we were capable of. So be wary, sweetie, and take care of yourself. Oh, you thought that was shocking? Sweetie, we're just getting started. Ever wonder why Halloween feels so liberating? It's not just the candy or costumes. There's a darker reason why people act so wild when they put on a mask. And trust me, it's not just one night a year. Let's talk about the power of anonymity, darling. It's like a drug, really. One taste, and suddenly you're doing things you never thought possible. Zimbardo calls it de-individuation, fancy word for losing yourself in a crowd. It's what happens when you feel invisible, when you think no one's watching. And oh, The things people do when they think they can't be seen. Meow. Remember that Stanford prison experiment I mentioned? Well, here's where it gets juicy. Those guards, they weren't some special breed of sadists. They were just regular college boys playing dress up.
You all have been chosen to be the prison guard.
But give them a uniform, a pair of shades, and suddenly they're acting like mini dictators. It only took 6 days for things to get so bad they had to shut the whole thing down. 6 days. Can you imagine? Now, you might be thinking, that's just an experiment. It's not real life. Oh, honey, if only. The truth is, this happens all around us, every day. It's why internet trolls say the most vile things from behind their screens. It's why people in mosh pits go absolutely wild. It's why some folks turn into complete monsters during riots. But here's the kicker. It's not just about being in a crowd. Sometimes all it takes is a little costume change. Those guards in the experiment, they wore uniforms and sunglasses. That's it. And suddenly they're treating their fellow students like cattle. The prisoners, they were stripped of their identities, given numbers instead of names. And just like that, they became helpless, broken. It's almost like magic, isn't it? Put on a mask, and suddenly you're not you anymore. You're someone else. Someone who can do things the real you would never dream of. It's thrilling. It's terrifying, and it's oh so easy to get lost in. But here's the real shocker, darling. This isn't just about extreme situations or psychological experiments. It's about you and me in our everyday lives. That time you were rude to a customer service rep on the phone, that nasty comment you left on a stranger's social media post, that's de-individuation in action. We all do it to some degree. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we're all monsters waiting to be unleashed, but I am saying that the potential is there, lurking just beneath the surface. And the scary part? Most of the time, we don't even realize it's happening. So, what's the takeaway here? Well, for one, maybe think twice before you put on a destructive style. But more importantly, remember that true power doesn't come from hiding behind a mask. The real villains, the ones we love to hate, they own their darkness. They revel in it. They don't need anonymity to be bad. But I have already deliciously analyzed it in another video. Check my channel. But don't miss out on the next chapter here, because it will be amazing. Oh, darling, you think you know yourself? Think again. What if I told you there's a monster living inside you, just waiting for the right moment to break free? And the scariest part? You might not even realize when it's already taken control. Philip Zimbardo, that delightful architect of darkness, argues that awareness of our potential for evil is crucial. It's not just about understanding others, sweetie. It's about looking in the mirror and recognizing the beast that lurks within. Shocking, isn't it? To think that you, yes, you, could become the very thing you fear. But here's where it gets deliciously twisted. It's not just about acknowledging our inner demons. It's about how easily we can unleash them on others. Ever heard of dehumanization? It's a fancy term for something terrifyingly simple. When we start seeing others as less than human, suddenly cruelty becomes oh so easy. Imagine this. You're in a room and someone tells you the person next to you is worthless, subhuman. How would you treat them? Would you still see them as an equal, or would you find it easier to be cruel?
You address me as Mr. Correctional Officer.
Yeah, right. Now you think you would be in control of the situation. But unfortunately, when you're out there, they can manipulate you more than you know. Albert Bandura, another mastermind of the mind, found that people who overheard others described in dehumanizing terms were significantly harsher in their punishments. It's like flipping a switch, turning empathy off and brutality on. But wait, it gets even juicier. We're not just talking about extreme situations. This happens every day in the most mundane ways. Ever heard someone use the term enhanced interrogation? Sounds almost clinical, doesn't it? But strip away the fancy words, and what are we really talking about? Torture, plain and simple. You see, language is a powerful tool, in the hands of a budding monster. We use these pretty little euphemisms to mask the ugliness of our actions. It's not firing people, it's downsizing. It's not bombing civilians, it's collateral damage. See how easy it is to justify the unjustifiable, to make the monstrous seem almost reasonable? And here's the kicker, darling. It's not just about fooling others, it's about fooling ourselves. When we use these sanitized terms, we're not just hiding the truth from the world, we're hiding it from ourselves. We're creating a cozy little bubble where we can do terrible things and still feel like the hero of our own story. Remember those participants in Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment? They were shocked by their own capacity for cruelty.
And while I was doing it, I didn't feel any regret. I didn't feel any guilt. It was only after.
They didn't wake up one morning and decide to be monsters. They slipped into it, one small step at a time, each action justified by the circumstances, by the roles they were playing. So here's the million-dollar question, sweetie. How do we stop ourselves from becoming the villain? Zimbardo says it's all about personal accountability. It's about recognizing our potential for evil and consciously choosing to act in ways that align with our moral values. It's about being vigilant, not just of others, but of ourselves. But let's be real, it's not easy. The moment we stop seeing others as fully human, we open the door to our own dark potential. It's a slippery slope, and once you start sliding, it's hard to stop. The key? Empathy, moral consideration, remembering that everyone, no matter how different they might seem, is just as human as we are. Maybe they have a heart of golden you never recognized. Oh, darling, we've journeyed through the dark depths of human nature, haven't we? From innocent faces turning sinister to the intoxicating power of anonymity. But here's the real shocker. It's not about them, it's about you. You see, sweetie, embracing your inner demon isn't about becoming a monster. It's about recognizing the monster within. As Zimbardo says, the capacity for evil may be within you, but so is the capacity for heroism. It's a delicious duality, isn't it? So here's my challenge to you. Look in the mirror. Really look. Can you see the darkness lurking behind those pretty eyes? Good. Now, what will you do with it? Will you let it consume you, or will you harness it for something greater? If you haven't seen my video comparing real-life villains to movie baddies, don't miss out on that. Remember, darling, the line between hero and villain is oh so thin. Which side will you choose?